Welcome to Critical Conversations. I'm your host, Vickie Thomas, Communications Director for the City of Detroit. Happy Women's History Month, and this is really the perfect time to have this critical conversation about women breaking down barriers. And we have a dynamic group of women here to have this conversation. We first have Jennifer Lee, who is Director of Community here at Bas Blue, and you are also our host today. So thank you for having us and for being a panelist.
Thank you for having me.
And one thing that I applaud Mayor Mike Duggan for is just having some seriously talented, fearless women in leadership positions in the city of Detroit, and we have a couple of them here today. We have Nicole Sherard-Freeman, who is Group Executive of Jobs, Economy, and Detroit at Work. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Jessica Parker, who is Chief Enforcement Officer of the city's BSEED department. And thank you also for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get to the heart of the matter and some of these critical issues, let's find out about all of you. So let's start with our hostess with the mostest. Jennifer, tell us about yourself and about this fabulous facility. And it is one of a kind, right? The first in Michigan.
It is, yeah. Thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you all here today in our space. Bas Blue is definitely become very near and dear to my heart over the last just 5 months of it being open. Again, my name is Jennifer Lee. I have a background mostly in the hospitality industry, the service industry. Spent most of my life there and in hotel operations. And when this opportunity came about, especially after coming out of such an intense period of COVID and being isolated and with my children and kind of really thinking about what I wanted to do next, the nonprofit mission of this space spoke to me in such a deep way, especially in a city that I hold so dear to my heart and love being a part of. Our mission here is to really offer an equal and equitable space to all women. And to help them through whatever stage of life it is that they may be in, whether it's a young girl coming out of college and needing a mentor or a sponsor to help her get to that next step, or whether it's a woman who's transitioning out of her career and finding out what does she do next and connecting with her community at large. So we do a lot of mentoring, educational panels, seminars, workshops, and everything is complimentary to our members once they join with us here. So it's really quite a mission to be proud of, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
And Nicole, you are responsible for economic development as well as workforce development. That's a lot. So when did this happen and what does it mean?
Sure. So in the fall of 2020, as the previous director of economic development, Nick Corey, was retiring for his third time, I think, the mayor came to me and said, listen, we've learned a lot with the Stellantis, formerly FCA deal. What do you think of putting economic development and workforce development together under one umbrella? And it was an offer I couldn't refuse. So what it means really is that we are bringing intense focus to large deals like Stellantis and FCA, GM, Amazon. We hope there will always be good deals, good large deals for City Council to react to. Increased emphasis on what's happening in our commercial corridors and our neighborhoods, and greater emphasis to small business. And all of that ought to land as an opportunity at the doorstep of a Detroiter. That's what it means to hang those two dimensions together.
And Jessica, I believe you're the first woman to hold your position as Chief Enforcement Officer. And you also have a military background. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your position.
So I joined the building department back in 2018, about November 2018. I've been there since then, and I came over from the General Services Department. I was asked to join BSEED to help change the culture, to help bring some diversity, especially in the leadership and management role. With my master's in architecture and with a military background, enforcement seems to be right up my alley, right? So I said, yes, I'll definitely come over. And being there has had some of its challenges, being a predominantly male department, but I love what I do. I oversee commercial, residential, and industrial properties as far as the maintenance, dangerous buildings, anything that's vacant and open. And my main focus is just making property owners accountable, making them accountable to how they upkeep their property, It can have its challenges because we're talking about the bigger fish out there that feel that they don't have to abide by the rules. But working with City Council, the Don, and the Mayor's office, we are slowly starting to bring some of these property owners into compliance.
Let's talk about Women's History Month and women breaking down barriers. We're still doing that to this day. We just heard from you, first woman in your position. I know in 2019, when I was inducted into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame, I was the first Black female radio broadcaster to be inducted. That was 2019. It was hard for me to believe. So just talk about the significance of Women's History Month and breaking down those barriers. So we'll start with you, Jennifer.
I think it's a really significant time in our history, being a woman who is actively seeing some of the changes that are coming almost back around, right? From not too many years ago, of the women that had to battle it the first time around. And now I'm sitting and thinking, here we are again, having the same conversation. How are we going backwards somehow? So for me, what it means is really paying attention to the history so that we are sure that we don't repeat it, making sure that we educate ourselves and learn as much as we can about what's at stake for us as women, and really creating sisterhood in all of our communities, because there's a lot that can get done, and women are excellent at doing that. And when we work together and we have a common goal and we find ways in which we can align, even if we are so very different in many ways, there's always something typically that you can align with another person, human to human, on what the overall goal is as a woman and what it means to live a full life. So to me, celebrating the women around me, I just feel fortunate to be in a space that every day is a celebration of that. And I'm constantly inspired by the women walking in these doors. I learn something new every day. I meet someone new every day, a mission I've never heard of, and I'm like, how have I not heard about this? Like, these are the stories that we need to be telling. Like, forget about some of the noise. This is good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff here. So I'm here to celebrate other women and carry on the torch of breaking down barriers, not taking no, and pushing where we need to push.
And I'll tell you, when I walked in here, it has a special feel too. And there's so many diverse women from ethnicity to age. I mean, young, old. It's just an amazing place.
It is. It has a rich history, this home, this block, this neighborhood, the surrounding community. And we have so many folks that come through with great stories. And it really came to life in the way we wanted it to. To your point, our youngest member is 23 and our oldest is 81.
Wow.
And our women are coming from everywhere and with all different backgrounds. And it's really great to see them all sitting in the same room and the same table. Like, that's what this space was built for. And it feels good to see it working.
I would have to say I agree with a lot of the points that Jennifer just made. I think it's healthy to recognize women. It just reminds us that we play a vital role to move not only this area, this community forward, but globally. We make decisions. I mean, we give life, we feed life. We're in the room having those important conversations, and we just need to sometimes be reminded of how we are important. It's a healthy conversation, and sometimes just coming together, huddling, and just reminding each other that sisterhood, that, hey, I'm here for you. Because sometimes it is hard to go out into a male-dominant environment and to stay strong and not have that emotional side to it, but to come back and have that reprieve, and to have that in this month to be recognized and to see that is just, hey, we get this time. This is our special time to kind of commune and come together. So I think it is outstanding. I think everyone should celebrate it. Every culture, every race, every gender. But most importantly, just to say, hey, we are here and we are important.
Nicole.
I mean, I don't know if there's anything to add to that. I think my co-panelists here, for me, it's all summed up in lest we forget. So lest we forget not only the names that are in the history books, not only the women who are celebrated across all industries, and as you said, globally. Yes. It's so important to remember those stories, but it's also important, it's an important moment for us to pause and pull up and remember the unsung heroes as well.
Yes.
And let's talk about women working in male-dominated fields. And we'll start with you, Nicole. What are some of the challenges there? And have you had any experiences where you're the only woman in the room dealing with some of these economic development workforce issues?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Vicki. There are many occasions when I am the only woman in the room, or one of only 2 or 3 women in a room of 10 or 12 or 20 men in the economic development realm. I mean, women in economic development, if you look across the nation, it isn't common. Now, there are more women who are breaking into the industry, rising up through the ranks of real estate development. I mean, you need only think about the mayor, state of the city, and out of that list of 33 developers, 2 of them were women. They are 2 women who are doing it, though.
Right.
Right. So, and certainly there are challenges inherent to that. We'd be silly to think that there aren't. I think the more important thing, though, for me personally, is walking into a room expecting to be successful, even when I am the only woman in the room. Even when I am the only person of color in the room, I walk in the room expecting it to work out just fine. And so far, that's how it's turned out.
I love it. Same question, Jessica.
So I would have to say that it is definitely challenging in the building department. It's predominantly male. 75% of the staff are male. Under myself, it's about 130 that I oversee, and of that, it's 75% men. And when I first walked in the door, I was questioned. What are your credentials? Who sent you here?
Oh, wow.
What made you feel that you should be here? I was questioned by a few of the male supervisors and inspectors. They hadn't seen a woman in this role or even a woman of color. So I had to basically have my master's degree in architecture, my bachelor's, my military background, everything had to be on display. Not that my word was good enough, but just, are you sure? And just constantly being questioned about what I know, what I am, and what I'm capable of doing. It took a while for them to understand that I was there for a purpose. I found myself having to make sure that the men that reported to me had a buy-in. I had to make sure they were invested in my idea so that they would go ahead and carry it out. Because I'm overseeing operations that are critical to the mayor initiatives that are set before me. And I have to include them, not just make that decision in my office, but making sure they understood what I was doing. I had no women inspectors under me except for one. And since I've been there, I made it a point to try and make sure we cast a wider net in hiring. So we've brought on maybe 3 more women inspectors, which is great, because they all need to understand that we are not excluding anyone. It should be including everyone. So it has definitely had its challenges, and we're still working through them, but it's an everyday effort on both sides.
And Jennifer, what do you hear from some of the women here, and have you had any
Yeah.
experiences like that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting role, right? Because it's predominantly women, and it's been interesting. We allow women to bring their male counterparts and teammates with them, and have an open door policy on that. And it's interesting to watch. They're a little bit uncomfortable, right, in an all women space. Like, can I use that space? Is that space for me? And that's interesting to me. I've never quite seen that. So I'm like, of course, I would never shut the door on you like I had the door shut on me at times, But to your point, in the hospitality industry is very often male dominated. A lot of big personalities, a lot of big opinions, and I really had to learn to find my voice and use it, and make sure that I was heard. Oftentimes it was always like, oh, are you taking notes? Like, who's taking notes? Is Jen, because I'm the woman, I'm taking notes? Like, no, you can take notes. But I had to assert myself in those rooms, and then suddenly they stopped asking me to take notes because I'm also working on, I have my own projects too. But it took a while. And I'm reminded a lot of times with our members here that not everyone knows how to find that voice or has found it quite yet, and gets very intimidated in those spaces. We just had a panel with a few really amazing women with the Pistons last week, and Denise Bailey, who now oversees Valley Sports, which was once Fox Sports. And she said when she had first come on, she kind of shared some stories. And she said when she showed up, folks were looking for a man. She's like, I'm here to report. She's like, great, but where's our boss? She's like, I am your boss. I hired you. I flew you here. But she had to prove. And she said that she was pressed for a lot of questions. Where did you come from? What are your credentials? And no one asked her male counterparts to see there. So it's very much alive. And, it's a true thing that's happening where, we have to fight hard still to get heard sometimes.
You've already mentioned some ways of overcoming some of those challenges, like saying I'm going to be successful when I walk in that room with all these men. Any other advice you would give people, women who are facing these same kinds of barriers?
Well, I would definitely say not to take it personal. That
Isn't it hard not to take it personal?
Absolutely is. But as women, by design, we're nurturers. We're loving, we're caring. We just want to make sure everything is going to work out, right? Just to your point. So when we are in that environment with those men, our counterparts, we have to make sure for me, the strongest person in the room. I pride myself on trying to be the strongest person in the room, and with my role, being the smartest person in the room if I can. But if there's a point where I need to pull them in, I do that. And I make sure, as to my point earlier, I'm including them. So my advice would be to make sure that you understand, first of all, what the goal is, establishing what the goal is. How are you going to get there? And who has that part? Everyone has a lane they should be in. Pulling everybody together so that they can do what they do best. And don't take it personal. Don't take it home if you can.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. For sure, having to think about how I respond and why I respond, because oftentimes, as a woman, you're expected to be, it's an irrational thought, or, you're
Emotional.
This is crazy. Don't get emotional. I'm like, but I think it's just being certain of who I know I want to show up as in a space. And that's just who I will show up as, regardless of what you're expecting me to say or what you expect me to be able to bring to the table based on your first impression of me. I know what I'm going to bring to a space, and I have to be confident in that. So I think for anybody, that's having that struggle, or, whether it's at work and you are the only woman and you're really feeling intimidated every day, you have to show up as the woman that you know that you are and want to be every day. And it's like one of those, fake it till you make it, until you feel like that woman and walk into a room and maybe you're not so nervous anymore. It takes time sometimes to get there.
I want to add to a point that Jessica made, and to build on your point, Jennifer, and that is, sometimes we forget that we have to build bridges before we need them. So if you are walking into a room and you don't have allies, you don't have a group of supporters for your idea, if you haven't worked that out in advance, you haven't done your homework. And that's true for women and men, right? And so being sure that you've got your group of supporters for whatever it is you're trying to do, right? You count your votes. Like, you never call for a vote count before you know what the votes are going to be, right? So you got to line up support before you get to that point. And sometimes that support comes from men, right? So I think we sometimes, in our very well-intentioned attempts to build coalitions around women and being supportive of other women, we forget that sometimes men are the allies. Like, they're not the enemy, they're the allies. We ought to be leveraging them in the same way that for so many years in so many rooms, they've leveraged us.
I knew you had some more great advice.
I don't know about that.
All right, let's look at women's issues in the workplace. We still have a lot of them to tackle: the wage gap, discrimination, expectations, the list goes on. So Jennifer, what do you hear from some of the women about the workplace issues that they may face?
We hear about the wage gap and how to have that conversation once you're aware of it, right? There are times where folks are made aware in the same office that maybe someone is making more than them, and how do I go about, negotiating my rate? And I think the biggest conversation that the women in our community and that I'm having with my own community is the load of being a working mother and the duties at home and the parenting and being great at work. That is definitely one of our biggest kind of talking points when we're looking to support women, and how can we help you with that conversation. So while there's a lot of topics that could be discussed, but I think for us, that is one that we're hearing, I think, the most often in this space. And we just continue to have those conversations, be transparent about it, and talk to folks who might have already experienced it to get a little feedback and a little direction and into where to step next.
Jessica?
I would say from some of the staff that the feedback I've received is being taken seriously. Whenever there's a problem that comes up, I always say, bring me the problem, but bring a solution. Some of the solutions that the women have presented have not been taken seriously, but they have to do extra steps, right, to prove that this is why I feel it at work. The other thing is the childcare. That's a concern because I have a lot of my clerical staff, single women, single moms that have children. And during the pandemic, it was hard for them to work from home because the kids were home. Right. So that was another struggle. But just the being taken as seriously as the men inspectors or the other men supervisors or positions in the department.
Nicole?
Yeah, so there's some really interesting data out of McKinsey around just the impact that COVID in particular has had on women and women of color in the workplace. And, as Jessica and Jennifer have both said, women tend to feel the stress of balancing home, whether it's kids or elder care, quite frankly, or other family responsibilities. Women tend to feel that stress and pressure more acutely at home, and they feel it more acutely at work. And so I think one of the most significant dynamics that we are dealing with now, and that quite candidly we haven't felt the full brunt of yet, is the impact that COVID will have on women, and quite frankly, the gains that we'd made, particularly in the corporate sector before the pandemic. I mean, we watched the Great Resignation start to erode that, and I think we got to be really careful about that moving forward.
And my next question, you all kind of touched on it, is managing a healthy family and work-life balance. In my mind, I don't know if that's even possible. Is it possible?
Well, before my positive colleagues weigh in here, constructive colleagues weigh in here, let me just echo what you just said. I know you got something encouraging to say. I gotta say, I don't know. I've stopped reaching for that. I don't know that that's possible. And and candidly, I've taken the stance of not promoting that with my daughter. I'm not promising her that that's attainable, right? Like, there are periods in your life where you better be paying more attention to your kids if you have them, or more attention to your parents when it's your turn to take on that responsibility. I don't know that whole family life balance thing
really exists.
If it's there, I haven't seen it.
Right.
Jennifer?
I would agree.
I would agree.
The conversations I have with my friends are certainly, I am struggling. Are you all struggling? And how are we supporting each other? Right? Is it just me? Do I need to let a little bit of it go? Asking for help. Even with my girlfriends, we have a group, and it's My Village is the name of it. And I'll reach out to them and say, I cannot be there today. I need somebody to help me. And for a long time, I didn't want to ask for help. I would do the house and the cleaning and the pickups, and I'd be here and be everywhere, and I was a mess because I was trying to have balance. I agree. I don't think that balance exists. I think there's periods where it feels a little more attainable than others. Right now feels like it's a lot of off-balance stuff going on, but I know I'm not alone, and I can be vulnerable with that, which allows me to forgive myself a little bit and give myself a little grace to really realize how much I'm doing.
Realize that
we're done doing that.
I would say definitely agree with you too that it is very hard, but when health becomes a play. I had some health concerns that happened a couple of years ago, so it made me stop and say, okay, slow down. You have to take care of yourself. And I think sometimes as women, we forget to do that. We're so busy taking care of everybody else that we're not doing our regular checkups. We're not going to get those regular exams that we're supposed to as women, just to make sure that we're okay. And my mom reminds me of that because she's a breast cancer survivor. And I said, you know what, let me make my doctor's appointments, because I would reschedule them because I had a meeting that popped up, or I had to go take care of this, or there's an interview I need to do. And I found myself rescheduling a lot of doctor's appointments, and to the point where I had to go. So I was forced to find some type of balance just to make sure I was okay, my temple was okay.
And to follow up on that, this one's for you, Nicole. What are some of the ways that society can work to help support working women?
Yeah, I think we have to do a couple of things, Vickie. I think we have to first get grounded and stay grounded in the data. So the 2021 McKinsey research article that I cited says that between 2015 and 2019, the number of women across no fewer than several hundred corporate organizations across the nation grew from 23% to 28%. And the number of women in the C-suite grew from 17% to 21%. So women had made significant gains. And then COVID. And so those numbers have changed dramatically. Women are leading in the Great Resignation. 1 out of 3 women has considered either downshifting her career or stepping out of the workplace entirely.
Wow.
And so I think the first thing we have to do is get grounded in the data and not make up solutions in boardrooms and very well-intentioned conference rooms, but talk to women on the front line, talk to them about the solutions that are going to be necessary to start to make the shifts, as you were saying, Jennifer, earlier, back to the right direction. I think we got to be grounded in the data and real about the potential solutions.
And Jennifer, how does Bas Blue support the empowerment of women?
I think this is, again, a really unique space where I've been in, where most of my coworkers are caregivers in some way, whether it's elder care, whether it's a sibling, whether it's their own children. So in other spaces where I've felt nervous to say I need to be the first one to go because I have my son's basketball game to go to and that's important to me, and I was looked at like, she must not really be invested in this, right, if she has other things to do. Being in a space where I can say, look, I'm going to need a little support on this, and we all kind of pick each other slack up, and we pick each other the day that she needs to go, I've got her covered. It feels really good. And so how is there a way for us to have these conversations where we aren't made to feel so guilty for also having families and having outside lives? We all do.
And
we
choosing
all
our
need-
kids.
Right. We all
Yeah.
need to be there for moments sometimes. And of course, yes, there's deadlines and there's important things that need to get done on certain dates. But if you're doing those things and you're excelling and you're exceeding, give me a break on a day that I need to be with my children, because that in fact makes me more invested in the place that I'm giving myself to in my career space. So I would love to see more of those conversations happen, and that's a big goal,
Yeah.
right? But it would be helpful. Yeah.
Definitely. And Jessica, what's some of the advice that you would have for women who may be struggling to, advance in their careers? What kind of advice would you give them if they're struggling and they need some additional support?
So the first thing I would ask the young lady, what is it that you want? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to be there? And if the answer is yes, then that is ultimately your goal. You can't look at who's around you or who are you competing with. Just more so staying the course of what you're trying to do in your career, in your life. And if that is the best environment for you to be in, then you kind of have to shrug it off. You can't look at the fact that, okay, well, I have to go to work with all these men. Well, look at it that you're going to work, that you have a job, that you're being paid to do something that you love, because at that point, it would have to be something that you love. If you're gonna have to put up with the extras, as some of the ladies at my job call it, it has to be worth it. Make sure it's worth it, because you don't want to compromise yourself. That's the first thing I would definitely say.
And Nicole, similar question. What's some of the advice that you would have for women seeking new careers or who want to advance in their current career?
Yeah, it's, the first piece of advice I have is around getting grounded and being sure that you've got the skills and you've got the experiences that match the ways in which the future of work are going to change and are already changing what work gets done, where, and by whom. That's the first thing. all the, as you just said, Jessica, all the extras, all the externalities are going to be there no matter what. The most important thing we can do for ourselves as women is be sure that we are prepared to take advantage of coming opportunities by taking professional development and continued upskilling as a real responsibility, self-responsibility.
And I know you talk about some of the women leaving the workforce, but what about some of the programs within the city? I know there are so many opportunities now for women. Where are women looking for work? Are they trying to advance in, non-traditional fields or male-dominated fields?
Yeah, there's a lot more interest, thank goodness, in STEAM careers. So the science, technology, and that includes it's STEM with an A for arts. So women in engineering, women in AV, autonomous vehicles, EV, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, all of these new technologies. There are so many companies that are interested in investing in women and men. They want to invest in everybody because they need the talent. And so, the city, Detroit at Work, your local community college or four-year university, Wayne State, Wayne County Community College, those are all great places to look for the skill building that you're going to need to stay relevant.
I remember when we did the press conference for Skills for Life, the woman that spoke, and she's now a truck driver.
Yeah, we've been really pleasantly surprised at the number of women and more mature women who are interested in Skills for Life. So I think we have 3, if I'm remembering correctly, at least 2, who are grandmothers. So they are in their 60s, and they are in Skills for Life, re-entering the workforce to prove to their grandchildren that it can be done and that they still have a whole lot of road left to drive, no pun intended.
Right. Well, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to get your take on a woman in history who has inspired you and why. So you're looking at me, Jessica, so we'll start with you.
Well, of course, there's a lot of women to choose from. The first one from, I guess, my generation, I would definitely say Michelle Obama. But to make it more personal, I'm going to go with my mom. She was a single mom of 2 kids. She worked 2 jobs, put me through college. She pushed me to go into the military, and I am happy she did. She just always instilled in me to never give up. And like I said earlier, with her being a breast cancer survivor, she was an example, a daily example, someone that I could see. Of course, picking someone from history we read about or seen in movies, but to just bring it home and to say for sure, seeing it in real time, my mother, Alice Knight.
All right, Jennifer.
When you asked that, I immediately thought of my grandmother. And again, yes, there's a ton of women throughout history that have blazed some amazing paths, but my grandmother specifically, she was a stubborn, driven woman, and I didn't find out a lot of her stories until later in her life. She's passed a few years ago, but she was more like my mother. And I remember specifically a story she told me. She worked for a carrier company, an administrative, and she got pregnant. And at that time, they didn't want women coming to work in her space where they were showing, right? They didn't want it talked about.
Wow.
And so the woman who came in and took over for her while she was, carrying her child, ended up breaking her foot. And they had no one to replace her. So they called my pregnant grandmother, and she said, well, certainly I'll come back. But then after that, every other woman in this space that gets pregnant, she will not go on leave. And after that, there was not another woman that was asked to leave that office. And so to me, I think about like the bravery and changing that and how much she did for me. But that's a pretty bold step and a big change. And that wasn't so long ago, right? That you were asked to leave for this, this time in your life. We couldn't bother having you be seen in the office, but we need you.
Right.
And they needed her enough. She had clearly done her work and was valuable to that company enough so that they were willing to change the rules kind of a bit. So I just love that story about her.
Yeah. That's a great
Yeah.
story. Nicole.
Yeah, I'm going to build on the examples of my colleagues here and name Eudora Allen, born in 1898, died in 1966 before I was born. I never knew her. She's not in anybody's books anywhere. She's my great-grandmother.
Wow.
And she bore 16 children,
16.
12 of whom lived. She was born to sharecroppers. And she's if I just think a couple generations back, she's the reason that, in your example, she's the reason that my grandmother and my mother, who is also deceased, is my shero. So I think, during Women's History Month, I'm about singing about the unsung heroes.
And it's funny, but Jessica, we were on the same page. I would have picked Michelle Obama and my mother. And my mother was a nurse. Sometimes she worked 2 jobs to support me and my brothers and sisters. And she was just a strong woman. And she's part of why I am the way I am and who I am today. So, hats off to moms, grandmas. Yes. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have. I've enjoyed the conversation. I want to thank you all for coming. Jessica Parker, Jennifer Lee, Nicole Sherard-Freeman. You are the bomb diggity. And happy Women's History Month. And again, thank you to Bas Blue for having us and hosting us here today.